Hi everyone, welcome to the OSHA presentation for Twin Tiers Eye Care. Today we're going to be covering the topics of violence prevention and safety, our emergency action plan, hazardous materials communication, and bloodborne pathogens. OSHA requires us to review these topics each year as a way to reduce workplace hazards. For each of these topics, there will be a video, followed by some slides of the most important parts of Twin Tiers Eye Care's OSHA policies. The full policies are located for everyone to view on the Forms folder. The first topic we're going to cover will be violence prevention and safety. As with each new topic that we go over, let's start with a video.
Welcome to Workplace Violence Prevention, an abridged edition of the Workplace Safety Training Program. Join us as we learn some of the basics in preventing workplace violence. First, how would you define a safe workplace? The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, under the U.S. Department of Labor, requires employers to provide a work environment free from recognizable hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious harm to employees. Who can perpetrate violence, and what constitutes a workplace? Workplace violence incidents can be divided into categories depending on the relationship between the assailant and the worker or workplace. Violence by personal relations is committed by someone who has a personal relationship with the worker, such as a current or former spouse, partner, friend, or relative. Violence by strangers occurs in two general ways. First, the stranger has no legitimate relationship to the worker or workplace and enters the workplace usually to commit a robbery or other violent act. Second, the worker is victimized by strangers outside the workplace, but while performing a job-related function. With violence by coworkers, the perpetrator has an employment relationship with the victim, meaning the perpetrator can be a current or former employee, prospective employee, coworker, or supervisor. And with violence by customers or clients, the violence is committed by someone who receives a service provided by a business, such as a current or former customer, client, patient, passenger, criminal suspect, or prisoner. A further distinction can be made between inherent violence and situational violence. Law enforcement can be considered inherently violent because part of the enforcement officer's job description is to deal with violent people. In contrast, employees in a business office are not expected to routinely deal with violent behaviors, but something in the situation may induce an otherwise nonviolent client or customer to become violent. As you can see, workplace violence can occur within a range of settings and relationships. Now that we know more about what workplace violence is, let's look at some statistics related to it. You may be surprised to learn that annually, 1 in 4 workers are attacked, threatened, or harassed, causing 500,000 employees to miss 1.75 million days of work, and costing businesses $13.5 billion in medical expenses. Unfortunately, these figures indicate that workplace violence occurs more than it should. That is why it is important for all of us to learn what we can to prevent it. Despite what is at stake, why are employees often hesitant to report inappropriate behavior? Frequently cited reasons include the 3 C's: confidentiality, camaraderie, and concern. With confidentiality, they might feel as if they were breaking a friend's trust. Regarding camaraderie, they might not want to be viewed as a troublemaker or snitch. And regarding concern, they may worry that reporting inappropriate behavior could result in retaliation against them or their family. Any one of hesitation's 3 C's is understandable, but the action you take can play a very important role in preventing a violent act. So what are the warning signs we should be aware of? Just because an individual behaves a certain way does not guarantee or predict that they will perpetrate some type of violent action. However, a small subset of individuals who have demonstrated these behaviors or warning signs will, typically after some sort of precipitating or triggering event. Signs to watch for are violent and threatening behavior. The person may show signs of hostility or approve the use of violence. Strange behavior. The person may become reclusive, neglect his or her appearance and hygiene, or behave erratically. Emotional problems. The person may grow dependent on drugs and/or alcohol, or become depressed and make unprovoked emotional outbursts. Performance problems. The person may have repeated and unexplained absences or excessive tardiness. Interpersonal problems. The person may have numerous relationship conflicts and show hypersensitivity and resentment towards others. Be aware that it is not always easy to differentiate warning signs from behaviors that simply demonstrate anger or frustration. Still, if you have a particular concern about somebody's behavior, you should inform human resources or other appropriate personnel in your company. It is crucial that you understand your role in helping to prevent workplace violence. That way, together we can maintain a safe and respectful work environment. Your role is to understand how to recognize warning signs and report these to your manager, HR generalist, or security director. In the case of an emergency, call 911 directly. Remember, this program is important to you for two reasons. First, you may be a witness to workplace violence or its warning signs. Your thoughtful and prompt intervention may be critical in preventing a harmful situation from developing. Second, you may be a potential victim of workplace violence. Through this training program and other initiatives, our company is taking measures to prevent any such occurrence. By participating in this program, you have taken an important step toward keeping your work environment safe, because early detection is key. Thanks for your participation in this abridged edition of the Workplace Violence Prevention Training Program. Please take the time to explore other areas of the Parkley website or contact us for more information about the services we provide.
We'll move now to the main points of Twin Tiers Eye Care's policy for violence prevention and safety. Some of this stuff is obvious. Here's the list of do's and don'ts. You can't threaten, assault, physically restrain, or put into confinement any patient or coworker. Any aggressive acts or the blatant disregard for the safety of others is prohibited. Examples include throwing objects and slamming doors. Report anyone who has violated one of these, along with anybody who has become disruptive or combative, to the administrator. Only people with legitimate reasons are allowed in our buildings. Report unrecognized visitors to your supervisor. If a coworker is believed to be at an increased risk of violence, provide assistance by allowing parking spots closer to the door or give them an escort when they leave. And always, call 911 if you feel it's necessary. Next on the list is our emergency action plan. What do you think?
It is often said that if something can go wrong, one day it will. We need to plan for that day. We need to be ready. Because what you know and do can make a difference.
We have a spill on the north side of the warehouse. We may want a cleanup crew.
Make sure that they
Emergencies can come at you from any direction at any time. They can stem from natural causes or human error and can include medical emergencies, gas leaks, fires, explosions, hurricanes, floods, even riots and acts of terrorism. The effects of an emergency can be devastating. People can be hurt. Some may die. Your facility can suffer serious physical damage, as can surrounding communities. And even though it wasn't your fault, your company's reputation can be trampled in the process. Of course, we can't prevent every incident, and we can't prepare for all possibilities. But we can plan ahead, so we're ready to tackle most of them. And by being prepared, we'll be able to help minimize any damage. One thing that emergency planning must address is how to prevent the domino effect. When an incident occurs, events often spread from one area to the next, picking up speed as they go. If we're prepared, we can keep problems from growing worse and shut this process down. Planning ahead allows us to act quickly and effectively.
Please know where the AED, flashlights, batteries, fire extinguishers, and emergency kits are located in your building. Emergency kits are checked daily for use and checked monthly for expiration dates, so they will be ready if ever needed. We have specific policies in place for medical, severe weather, bomb threat, power loss, electrical shortage, gas leaks, and fire. You could find our detailed plans for each of these in the Forms folder. These are the most important parts. For medical emergencies, call 911 and only attempt first aid if you are trained to do so. For severe weather, follow the instructions given in weather reports unless directed otherwise by the administrator. For bomb threats, try to keep the person talking and take down as much information as possible, such as voice characteristics, background noises, package type, and do they seem familiar with the building. For power loss, escort patients to an area that's lit up. Contact NYSEG. If it's going to be an extended power outage, unplug all electrical equipment. For electrical shortages, unplug the equipment, label it as defective, then contact somebody for repair. For gas leaks, immediately notify your supervisor. For fire emergencies, notify people that there's a fire. Call 911 and only attempt to extinguish a fire if you know how to use a fire extinguisher. Here's a short video that shows how to properly use a fire extinguisher.
How to use a fire extinguisher. Accidents happen. Be prepared to fight your own fire by learning how to use a fire extinguisher. You will need courage, calm, and a fire extinguisher. Step 1. Know how fire extinguishers are classified. Class A extinguishers are for common combustibles like paper or wood. Class B are for flammable liquids, and Class C are for electrical fires. The Red Cross recommends ABC classified fire extinguishers for home use. Step 2. Inspect the fire extinguisher before use. Read instructions and warnings, check that the pressure gauge needle is in the green portion of the gauge, and check for a clogged nozzle, a broken seal, or other damage. A fire extinguisher won't work if it's not properly charged. The pressure gauge measures the charge. Step 3. Decide if you'll evacuate or stay and fight the fire. Consider the size of the fire, the amount of smoke in the room, and whether there is a reliable escape route. Step 4. Remember the acronym PASS. It stands for pull, aim, squeeze, and sweep. Step 5. Pull the pin or ring that unlocks the fire extinguisher's operating handle and aim the extinguisher at the base of the fire. Aim at the fire from 6 to 8 feet away. Step 6. Squeeze the extinguisher lever to discharge its contents and sweep the hose back and forth until the extinguisher is empty. Did you know? Food Network star Alton Brown used a carbon dioxide fire extinguisher, a water cooler bottle, and a tennis racket to make a fruit smoothie on television.
Sometimes, these emergencies will lead to evacuations. Our evacuation procedure is something we take very seriously, so I will go into a little more detail about evacuations. Besides getting everyone out safely, we want to make sure that everyone is accounted for. This is to prevent endangering the emergency responders by sending them on a possibly unnecessary search and rescue mission. So this is how we handle it. Notify everyone that an evacuation is underway, both verbally and by pressing the fire button on the alarm panel, wherever applicable. The fire button will call the fire department and activate the local alarm. Be aware of other locations in your buildings that may need to be alerted. Examples include the ASC in the billing office in Elmira, the lab in Corning, or the basement in Bath. The clinical staff will check the exam rooms and procedure rooms. The clerical staff will empty the waiting areas, bathrooms, and kitchen. The optical staff will clear the optical and employee offices. If possible, unplug electrical equipment as you move along. As the rooms are checked, hang a tag on the doorknob to confirm the room is clear. Plain white door tags are located at each tech station and front desks. After each department has checked their sections, the office manager, or his or her representative, will do one last sweep to make sure that every room has been checked and every door is closed. And this is all within reason. Don't put yourself in any increased risk of danger. As you exit the building, direct everyone to the gathering place. In Binghamton, meet in the back section of the parking lot near the dumpsters. In Endicott, gather in the side yard up near the sidewalk. In Elmira, we'll meet at the Twin Tiers Eye Care sign in the front of the parking lot. In Corning, meet at the right-hand side of the entrance on the sidewalk. In Watkins Glen, meet in the side field near the pear tree. And finally, in Bath, meet in the back of the parking lot near the shed. As the building empties, call another office to look up the schedule of patients. This is to get the names of patients who were inside at the time of evacuation. This may not be possible depending on the location or the type of your emergency. Once people arrive at the gathering area, ask patients to account for their guests, and supervisors will account for the people that they are in charge of for the day. At this point, we will be able to accurately report to the emergency responders if everyone made it out. So that's all for the emergency action plan. Hazardous materials communication is next, and again, we'll begin with a video.
Some 32 million workers are potentially exposed to hazardous chemicals on the job each year. Chemical exposure can cause and contribute to a number of serious health problems. Some chemicals may also be safety hazards and can cause fires and explosions and other serious accidents. Employees have a need and a right to know the hazards of chemicals and drugs they work with, how to read labels and material safety data sheets, the proper personal protective equipment to wear when working with a hazardous chemical or drug, how to properly dispose of hazardous PPE, how to handle a leak or spill, how to be prepared to handle an employee exposure situation. A chemical is considered hazardous if it is labeled as flammable, explosive, eye irritant, requires well-ventilated area, carcinogenic, corrosive, sensitizing, and target organ affecting. In order to protect workers from the potentially harmful effects of hazardous chemicals, OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, issued the Hazard Communication Standard. This standard requires that the hazards of all chemicals and drugs are evaluated, and that this hazard information is passed on to affected employers and exposed employees. Compliance with the standard involves creating a written hazard communication plan that outlines how employee information will be distributed and how training will be accomplished. The standard describes the requirements for labels and other forms of warning, such as MSDSs, material safety data sheets. Employees are not expected to memorize information in the MSDS, but they are expected to know where to look to find critical information, such as the hazards associated with the product, the signs and symptoms of occupational overexposure, and the proper PPE to use when handling the product. Hazard communication is an ongoing program, not a one-time effort. In order to have a successful program, the safety officer must provide initial and ongoing training to employees.
MSDS information is readily available in case anybody needs to access it. So if it's needed, all MSDS information is in the Forms folder on the server, and it's in alphabetical order. There's also a digital copy in the purchasing office, and the ASC has a hard copy. The next few slides will give instructions on how to access the MSDS information located in the Forms folder. Our material safety data sheets will be changing this year. Beginning June 1st, 2015, all MSDS information will be completely updated with the new SDS layout. This current slide shows how the new SDS format will appear. This user-friendly layout will make accessing information faster. It is part of the United Nations globally harmonized system. The MSDS folder will simply change names to SDS on or before June 1st. All of the existing MSDS sheets will be changed to this SDS style, and all of the new SDS sheets we receive will be formatted in this style. This information will still be located in the same spot. Another part of the UN's globally harmonized system is the labeling of hazardous materials. Like we just saw in the previous video, there used to be certain words that we looked for when determining if something was dangerous. This new system replaces those words with these symbols you see on the screen. This will make it especially convenient if you are looking at a container that isn't in a language you're familiar with. Please make yourself familiar with these images. Now there are a couple other things to keep in mind for hazardous safety. To help prevent exposure to chemicals, do not use or create secondary containers. The only exception for this is Opticide. If there's something that you need to put in a secondary container, please see the head technician or the facilities manager. Follow all safety instructions that are listed on the labels attached to containers. Do not use a container if the label has been removed. Another portion of our hazardous materials communication plan deals with personal protective equipment. Personal protective equipment, or PPE, refers to equipment, garments, and barrier materials used to protect employees from exposure to biological, chemical, and radioactive hazards. Routes of exposure can be through inhalation, skin absorption, and ingestion. Knowing the hazards and how to protect yourself is the key to safety. Types of personal protective equipment are eye and face, respiratory, head, foot, electrical protective devices, hand and skin, and hearing protection. In the office setting, clerical and clinical areas only require eye, hand, and skin protection. Maintenance areas require most of this list. Here's a list of what's required for our clinical staff to guard against potential splashing or splatter type exposures that could result when pouring chemicals, scrubbing dirty instruments, or assisting with the drainage of an abscessed eyelid. Gloves protect from absorption of chemicals, but also protect against potential exposure to blood and other pathogens from entering our body through dry, chapped hands. So that wraps up the most important parts of our hazardous materials communication plan. The last topic we'll be covering is bloodborne pathogens.
As an employee for a medical facility, you could face exposure risks while carrying out your routine duties. If you have maintenance, cleanup, custodial, laundry, or other duties in the healthcare setting, you face the risk of coming into contact with bloodborne pathogens. Bloodborne pathogens are the infectious materials in blood that can cause diseases in humans. This program will teach you how to protect yourself from these and the many other bloodborne pathogens found in the healthcare setting. The most common way a worker in a medical facility can become infected with bloodborne pathogens is through contact with infected blood, by way of a needle stick, a cut with a sharp object, or through breaks in the skin and through a mucous membrane, such as the eyes or the nose. Workers should assume that the blood and other body fluids from all patients are potentially infectious. This may require you to change the way you perform various tasks, such as hand washing, laundry handling, and cleaning up contaminated materials. Employers are required by OSHA to provide appropriate personal protective equipment and clothing free of charge to employees. The type of protective equipment used depends upon the expected exposure. For example, gloves may be suitable for housekeeping staff, while a laundry worker handling blood-soaked laundry would need considerably more protective clothing. Proper handling of regulated waste is essential to prevent unnecessary exposure to blood and other potentially infectious materials. Regulated waste includes used needles and contaminated sharps, liquid and semi-liquid blood, as well as dried blood and other potentially infectious materials. Good housekeeping and waste management practices will go a long way in preventing exposure incidents.
These are the top pathogens transmitted through needle stick and other blood and bodily fluid exposures. Many times they are asymptomatic, so we treat every exposure as potentially infectious using standard precautions. The next few slides look at the symptoms of HIV, hepatitis B, and hepatitis C. For increased awareness, please look them over. The CDC estimates that 1 in 5 people infected with HIV are not aware of their infection. The Hepatitis B Foundation says that 90% of people will develop protective antibodies to fight off Hep B. The remaining 10% will develop chronic hepatitis B. They also say that 1 in 20 people in the U.S. have been infected. The CDC estimates that 3.2 million people in the United States are infected with hepatitis C. Around 80% of people who become infected with hepatitis C will develop the chronic infection. Other facts about hepatitis C are that most people do not show symptoms. People infected can experience temporary yellowing of the skin. Those who have the chronic infection often have no symptoms until their liver becomes scarred. Most people with this condition are ill and have many health problems. Physicians will evaluate a potential exposure for source of blood, events of exposure, Hep B status of the employee, and the hepatitis B and HIV status of the source. Recognize exposure situations. They can be needle stick, laceration, bite, mucous membrane exposure to blood or bodily fluids, and non-intact skin exposure such as chapped skin, dermatitis, abrasions, or open wounds to an infected source. If presented with a possible exposure, immediately wash the involved area with soap and water. Report any exposure incidents immediately to the head technician or physician on site. Then report to your head technician to coordinate the medical evaluation and post-exposure procedure. Our exposure plan consists of medical evaluation within 1 hour of the incident, pre- and post-test counseling. The source is evaluated for potential HIV or HBV infection. Serological testing of the source patient if unknown. Treatment will be based on the testing results and the hepatitis B surface antigen status of the source. All medical care is paid for by Twin Tiers Eye Cares. The last bloodborne pathogen we'll discuss is tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is a lung infection caused by breathing in droplets from a cough or sneeze from an infected person. Healthcare workers are also exposed to TB from patients they care for. The following people are at high risk of active TB: elderly, infants, and people with weakened immune systems that may be caused by AIDS, chemotherapy, diabetes, or medicines that weaken the immune system. The exposure control plan for TB first consists of testing. Our high-risk positions for TB exposure are physicians, technicians, scribes, and opticians. Tuberculin skin testing will be given to all new hires, unless a new hire can provide the results of testing that was done to them within the past 6 months. There will be an annual TST to all employees. The results will be read in 48 to 72 hours. We will measure the induration, not the redness. An induration of 5 to 10 millimeters will be considered positive depending on risk factors. In case of a positive TST, the head technician will coordinate medical evaluation and counseling through the County Public Health Office. The medical evaluation will consist of a complete history to determine risk factors, a chest X-ray to detect active disease, and blood testing. The treatment will be determined based on the results. There's a possible 6 to 9 months of prophylactic treatment for a latent TB infection. Awareness is the key. Simply put, be aware of your actions and how they may impact your health and the health of others around you. So that's going to do it for this presentation on Twin Tiers Eye Care's OSHA policies. Please take a look at the full policies located in the Forms folder to get a more in-depth view and to keep yourself up to speed throughout the year.